Hey everyone, welcome back to part 2 of our series of editing in Lightroom. Our first video, if you haven't watched it, I encourage you to go back and do that. It's very helpful in figuring out what kind of workflow you should be working towards in picking out your favorite photos and kind of how to do that and how to cycle through the views that you can have in Lightroom. Now we're going to go through some general editing practices that I do when bringing in a shoot. So if you look over here, I'm already in the develop module. Previously we were in the library module. You can either click on that or you can press D. Again, I love my hotkeys. And the first thing that you'll see up here is the crop rectangle or the crop overlay. So if you click on that, it brings this up. I prefer using the rule of thirds crop overlay just so I know that I'm going to have the eyes of the subject or the most important, the focal point of the subject exactly where I want it in the photo. And this just kind of helps us get there. So what I typically do is I either leave it in original or 4x5, 8x10. You can see how that changes the constraints of the crop rectangle, and that's just because that's a very typical printing size. Alright, if you grab this corner over here, that'll bring it on down, and we want to get this light box kind of out of the way. If you look over here in this box over here, that's going to give us a preview of what we're doing with our crop. So as we bring it down and let it go, you can see that's where I want it. You know, we got a little bit left up here. Go back and forth and look in your picture in that box. We're going to give them a little bit more space over this way. Alright, and I'm not going to line this point up with his eyes just yet because I need to rotate this. You can see he's kind of slouched a little bit. A fun little trick that you can use if your clients just don't sit up straight. This guy has a pretty good excuse, Chase. He's a good friend of mine. And so let's rotate him just a little bit. I'm looking over here in this side. Also, if you have an extra monitor set up, you can set it up to where this box will be over on your other screen, which is really handy to have. So I'm going to pull him up just a little bit more, and that's about where I want it. And actually, maybe it rotated a little bit too far, so let's bring it back just a little bit. You can see I'm just clicking over here, holding down, and then dragging. And then give him a little space right there. And that eye is pretty close to right there. Let's bring that space in just a hair. And I think that's about where I want it. So you can click done. And there we go. Going back over here, Lightroom has done a good job of designing these sliders in just about the order that you need to go, or maybe I've just gotten used to this order, but where I like to start out with is the white balance. So I start out with color, and getting your white balance set correctly is a great place to start whenever you're editing for color. So if you're looking at a picture wondering what you should do, you have no idea, you're a bit lost, always start with your color balance as far as white balance is concerned. So you can click auto. I find that auto typically makes it a little bit too cold, so you can see it really didn't change it at all. It's not a bad white balance, but this is a little bit blue right here, and down in here it's a little bit greenish and bluish. That just kind of takes practice to see, to be honest. So let me undo that. I have these values over here because I shot this photo in RAW. If you did not shoot in RAW, if you just shot your photos in JPEG, this will just be a 0 and a 0. Both sliders will be there in the middle because it doesn't have as much information. Alright, so I'm going to slide this over to just about where I want it, and let's see here, that's about it right there. Like I said, he looks a little green, so let's slide that over just a hair. And then you can click the push the / button that's just above the enter or return key on your keyboard to go back to the before look. You can see there it goes right there, and that's really, you could see the difference there. So warmer and then colder, warmer, and that's about where we want it. Okay, the exposure looks pretty good. Again, you can play with these sliders as much as you want. I kind of like that right there, just a hair more. Okay, contrast, again, it's whatever your eye is going for, whatever look you're going for. If you want to go for, and again, here is kind of a pale, kind of ghosty look, who knows, that may be what you want. not on this photo for me. So, and with him being a pretty strong masculine guy, I can go a little bit more on the contrasty side, kind of bring out some of those lines a little bit better. Highlights. The highlights are looking pretty good. They don't look overexposed or blown out or anything. If I pull them up a little bit, you can see they kind of start to lose detail there in the highlight right there. So let's bring it down. I like it actually just where it is, so I'm going to select that just by pushing it, type it in a value, clicking outside of it, or you can push enter, and that's it. The shadows, I may bring the shadows down just a hair, again, just to provide a little bit more of a dramatic look, and you can see the shadows in there just kind of barely fading in and out as I move that slider. So there's the highlights and the shadows. You can see the highlights there and the shadows are the dark parts. Okay, that's pretty obvious. What a lot of people get confused on is like, well, what's a white and what's a black? So you see there how that's doing something completely different from what the highlights did. So that's turning things into more of a white instead of bringing up what the highlights are. So it's bringing up the highlights into being more of a white. And this is going to bring the shadows down to being more of a black. So you can see we can get really artistic with this if we wanted to and bring this all the way down. And it looks kind of neat. I don't know. It's not really the look that I was going for though. So I'm going to bring this up to, I don't know, probably -6. I like bringing down the blacks in most of my photos, to be honest, just to get rid of some of that haze and a little bit of fog. And then clarity. Clarity, it can be tricky. So with a little bit of clarity, you can really enhance a photo, especially like this one, where we're going for not necessarily soft light. You can see we have definite breaks between highlights and shadows right there. So I'm okay with boosting up the clarity a little bit. And he's, like I said before, he's a pretty strong masculine guy. Don't really want to boost too much clarity on women, though. It gives really sharp lines. So again, if we boost it all the way, I mean, if that's a look that you're going for, it could be cool. It works really, really well with athletes. If you're doing like a really strongly lit shot of an athlete, this looks great with that. But again, I'm just going to pull this back down to where I want to, and it'll take your eyes a bit to reset between going from really soft to really strong. So maybe give your eyes a break, go to another photo when you're adjusting clarity a little bit. So I want my clarity just about right there. Okay. Again, that's probably what I'm going to do for a lot of these photos. And so for the rest of these, what I can do is I can sync those adjustments across those photos because I know they're all taken at the same time with the same settings. So I'll hold down the Shift key, select all the photos I want to apply that to, press the sync button. That's going to bring up this dialog box. What I do not want checked is this crop. I don't want the crop or the spot removal. I haven't done any spot removals yet. And then the rest of it, local adjustments, I haven't done any local adjustments, but with a brush and something like that, that is very specific to an individual photo, you don't want that checked either. So check it out. Check it out down here after I synchronize. All of these edits that I've done over here with the sliders are going to be applied across all of these photos. So we don't have to go and edit those individually. It's a big time saver. So check that out. You see how that's applied there. And then again, I'm just going to go through and do a crop here. Bam. Let's change that to 4x5, 8x10. I'm looking up here again. I kind of like his angle there. Alright, I like the way that looks. And so I'm just going to go through each of these photos. These photos are fine here. Again, I can do a crop, bring that in a little bit. And we're going to go back through in just a little bit. And I know that this isn't on a rule of thirds line, but I really like how that looks. So let's push done. And check out that edit. I really like the way that looks. If you press F, the F key, it brings it into full screen. So you can really check out how that looks. And I'm really digging that. I like how he's a little bit off center. It's really nice to look at. Again, that's why we're making photos look great in the first place. We want something that's nice to look at. So I'm going to look at this photo and this photo in particular. because this is where we're going to have to change up some exposure and some highlight values. So he's a little bit overexposed. This photo is kind of overexposed in general. You can look at what your camera settings are by pressing the I button twice. Okay, so this is going to give you the date it was taken on, time, things like that. And this will give you your camera settings. So I shot this at f8. I was using my 55mm 1.8 Carl Zeiss lens. Absolute beast of a lens. Alright, I was shooting that at f8. I probably could have gotten away with around f10. And so let's bring that exposure down just a little bit, and that's a good exposure. You can see there on the shadow side we still have plenty of detail. On the highlight we're starting to lose some of the detail. It's a little bit blown out, so let's pull those highlights back down just a hair. Okay, there, that's good. And then let's go back and adjust our white balance. And you notice on this one I went in a little bit of reverse order from what I did in the previous ones. That's because I noticed that the exposures and the highlights values were so off that I needed to fix those first before getting a really good white balance on that. And I think you want to pull the highlights down just a bit more. And again, you have to be careful with that and decide for yourself where you think that you want that photo to be. Pull my shadows up just a hair. We're going to fix the background in a later video. You could do that in Photoshop or Lightroom. I prefer just to do it in Lightroom if I can. It's not a big deal to fix. I'll show you guys how to do that using a local adjustment brush. Alright, so let's go to one where it's a little bit underexposed. So I can see from the thumbnail picture that's underexposed and the white balance value is pretty cold. So let's bring up our exposure value to about where we want it. And again, the science involved should be involved whenever you're taking the photo. When you're doing editing, it's all about your creative process and where you want the photo to be. So you have to make sure you have a calibrated monitor. I'm doing this on my 27-inch iMac Retina display. It's calibrated, so I know exactly how this photo is going to come out. And this is really a true color that I've got going on right here. So again, like I said, he is kind of cold there. So let's bring back to where we get a nice warm skin tone. Again, you don't want him to look jaundiced or anything like that. So let's bring him back to about right there. Alright, that's looking pretty good. I'm happy with that. He's a little green. Let's pull the tint slider over just a hair. There we go. That looks great. Alright, again, and then I'm going to use the plus and minus keys on my keyboard. I have it set for exposure right now. You see how that little message popped up. You can click on the words over here to what you want to modify with just the plus and minus keys, if that's easier for you than using a mouse. So I'm going to boost that just a little bit. That gets my exposure exactly where I want it to be. Bump up my contrast just a hair. I don't want to lose too much in this because it's really high lit and then falls right off into shadow. So we don't need a whole lot of contrast there. Highlights, they all look good. I always fiddle with them just a hair anyway. I actually want to pull these up just a bit. Add a little bit of dynamic range to the photo. The shadows are looking good. I can pull them down just a hair to about right there. Okay, good deal. My whites, he's looking a little white, so let's pull it down just a bit. More than a bit, about around 30. And again, like I said, I always love to pull down my blacks in most of my photos. You can see right here, he's starting to lose a little bit of detail in his hair as I'm pulling down the blacks. So we might want to pull the shadows up just a little bit. Alright, there we go. And that one looks good. Boost the clarity just a touch. And I'm happy with how that photo looks. A lot of what you're going to have to do is play around with the sliders a bit to get it exactly where you want it to be. I have quite a bit of practice in Lightroom, so I have a good general idea of where to start and how things are going to look as I adjust sliders. But even at that, I still go back and make adjustments as I see needed as I go through each of these. So again, syncing through with our settings, that photo right there and maybe that one. Let's apply those things to this, those settings to those photos, and I'm liking the way that looks. That's pretty good. Come back for the next video. We're going to do some more edits using our using some black and white features and creating virtual copies and some of the other more advanced techniques that I like to use while I'm editing.